My name is Megan Holloway, and I'm 32 years old. 5 years ago, my mother called me 3 days before Thanksgiving and said 7 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about family. Don't come home this year. Allison doesn't want drama. No explanation. No apology. Just a door slammed shut on 27 years of trying to belong. I spent that Thanksgiving alone at a restaurant in Boston, watching happy families laugh together while I fought back tears over a cold turkey dinner. I had no idea that the strangers at the next table would become the family I'd always dreamed of. I had no idea that 5 years later they'd be introduced at my wedding as the parents of the bride, while my biological parents stood watching, uninvited, realizing they'd been replaced in every way that matters. But before I tell you about that moment, the moment when everything came full circle, let me take you back to where it all began, to a phone call on a cold November evening and the night I finally stopped shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. I remember exactly where I was standing when my phone rang. November 21st, 3 days before Thanksgiving. I was in my tiny studio apartment in Boston, the kind of place where you could touch the refrigerator from your bed if you stretched far enough. Half-packed bags sat open on my floor. A pumpkin-scented candle flickered on the windowsill. My small attempt to summon the holiday spirit in a space that had never quite felt like home. I'd already bought my plane ticket back to Connecticut. Non-refundable, because that's the kind of optimistic idiot I was. Every year I told myself it would be different. Every year I believed. Mom's name flashed on my screen. I smiled and picked up. "Hey, Mom. I was just about to—" "Megan." Her voice was flat. Cold. The kind of cold that made my stomach drop before my brain could catch up. "I need to tell you something." I set down the sweater I'd been folding. "What's wrong? Is Dad okay?" "Your father's fine." A pause. The kind of pause that fills with all the things a person doesn't want to say. "Listen, I've been thinking, and don't come home this year." I actually laughed. The sound came out strangled and strange. "What do you mean?" "Allison doesn't want drama." My mother's voice hardened into something familiar, that tone she used when she'd already made up her mind and resented having to explain herself. "She's pregnant again, and she doesn't need the stress." I gripped the phone tighter. My knuckles went white. "Drama? What drama? I haven't even talked to Allison in months." "Exactly." The word landed like a slap. "And let's keep it that way. You know how you get." How I get. 3 words that had followed me my entire life. How I get when I ask questions. How I get when I express hurt. How I get when I dare to exist in a way that inconveniences anyone. Mom, I literally just asked her last year why she didn't invite me to her baby shower. My voice cracked despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "That's not drama. That's a question." "See?" I could almost hear her shaking her head. "That's exactly what I mean. You always make everything about you." I stood frozen, watching the first snowflakes of the season drift past my window. 27 years old, and my mother was telling me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving because I'd once asked why I was excluded. "Mom, I already bought my ticket." "Then get a refund." Her tone left no room for negotiation. "Allison is pregnant. She doesn't need stress, you understand?" The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there for a long moment, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence where my mother's voice had been. The pumpkin candle flickered. Outside, Boston carried on with its evening, cars honking, people laughing on the street below, the world continuing to spin as if nothing had happened. I looked down at the plane ticket on my desk. $347.89. Non-refundable. The price of believing things could be different. I called my father. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some small part of me still believed he would stand up for me. Just this once. Just when it mattered. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. "Hey, kiddo." His voice was cautious, careful. The voice of a man who already knew what this call was about and had spent the last few minutes deciding not to do anything about it. "Dad, did Mom tell you?" A long pause. I could hear the television in the background, a football game, the crowd cheering for someone's victory. She mentioned it. "And you're okay with this? You don't think maybe I should be allowed at Thanksgiving with my own family?" Another pause, longer this time. I could picture him sitting in his recliner, rubbing his forehead the way he always did when he wanted to disappear from a conversation. "You know how your mother is, Megan. She's just trying to keep the peace. By excluding me. It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Dad?" I hated how my voice sounded, thin and desperate, like a child begging for scraps. "Tell me, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're all choosing Allison over me. Again." Silence. I could hear him breathing. I could almost see him shifting in his chair, looking toward the kitchen where Mom was probably pretending not to listen. The two of them locked in the conspiracy of silence that had defined my entire childhood. "Dad," I made my voice as clear as I could. "Do you want me there?" 5 seconds passed. 10. He cleared his throat. "I think it's better if you listen to your mother this year." Something inside me went quiet. Not sad, not angry, just empty, like someone had reached inside my chest and scooped out whatever had still been hoping. "Okay, Dad." "Megan, don't be like—" I hung up. He didn't call back. I sat in my apartment as the sun went down, watching the shadows stretch across my floor like dark fingers reaching for something they'd never catch. My father had a chance to choose me, to say one word in my defense, and he chose silence instead. He was always in the middle, that's what he'd say. "I'm stuck in the middle, sweetheart." But I realized now that there was no middle. There was only one side, and he'd been standing on it all along. He just couldn't admit it, maybe even to himself. But as the darkness settled in through my window, something else settled in me too. A quiet decision. If I wasn't welcome at their table, I'd make my own Thanksgiving. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in the dark and watched the highlight reel of my life play out against my ceiling. A montage of all the times I'd been the acceptable sacrifice. I'd been planning it for months. Just a small gathering, me and my 3 closest friends. Mom promised we'd have cake and go bowling. I'd picked out the bowling alley myself, spent hours deciding on the perfect playlist for the car ride, imagined blowing out candles while people actually sang to me. But the morning of my birthday, Allison called, crying. She'd failed her calculus final and needed emotional support. Within an hour, my party was canceled. The whole family piled into the car to drive to Allison's apartment 2 hours away to console her about a test she'd failed because she'd been too busy with her boyfriend to study. "Don't be dramatic, Megan," my mother said when I tried to protest. "Your sister needs us more right now. You can celebrate next weekend." We never did. I'd worked so hard for that moment. 4 years of late nights and part-time jobs and scraping by on ramen and discount coffee. I was the first person in my family to graduate with honors, the first to graduate at all. I walked across that stage, reached for my diploma, and looked out into the crowd for my parents. Their seats were empty. They showed up 2 hours later, just as I was helping fold up chairs. Allison had a routine prenatal checkup that couldn't be rescheduled. "You understand, sweetheart," Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your sister's baby is more important than a ceremony. More important than me." That's what she meant. That's what she always meant. Last year, Allison's second pregnancy. I found out about the shower from Instagram, a photo someone tagged me in by accident. 24 people crowded around my sister in a restaurant I recognized from family dinners, opening presents, eating cake, celebrating. I wasn't invited. When I asked Allison why, not accusingly, not dramatically, just why, she rolled her eyes. "God, Megan, you always make everything about yourself. It was just a small thing. I didn't think you'd want to come anyway." That was it. That was the drama my mother was referring to. The crime of asking why I'd been excluded from my own sister's celebration. I learned early that complaining only made things worse. Don't be so sensitive. Stop making everything about yourself. Why can't you just be happy for your sister? So, I stopped complaining. I became smaller, quieter. I thought if I was agreeable enough, easy enough, invisible enough, Maybe then I'd finally earn their love. I was 27 years old, sitting in a cold apartment with a worthless plane ticket, and I finally understood the truth. There was no amount of small that would ever be small enough. But something else surfaced that night, a memory I'd buried so deep I'd almost forgotten it existed. I was 12, hiding in the hallway closet during a family gathering because the noise overwhelmed me. Through the slats of the door, I could see into the kitchen where my grandmother was talking to my mother in low, serious tones. Trish, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep putting all your attention on Allison and ignoring Megan. It's not fair to either of them. My mother's response was sharp, defensive. You don't understand, Mom. I almost lost Allison. When she was born, the cord was wrapped around her neck and she was blue, and for 30 seconds I thought she was dead. 30 seconds that lasted a lifetime. That was 12 years ago. I don't care. My mother's voice cracked. I can't lose her. I can't let anything happen to her. I won't. And Megan? Silence. I'd forgotten that conversation until now. Or maybe I'd chosen to forget it because remembering would mean understanding that my mother's neglect wasn't random cruelty. It was fear, a trauma that had calcified into favoritism, a wound that had become a wall. But understanding isn't the same as excusing. Understanding why she did it didn't make it hurt less. It didn't give me back my 16th birthday or my graduation or any of the 1,000 small moments when I needed a mother and found an empty chair instead. The sky outside my window began to lighten. Somewhere in the distance, a garbage truck rumbled through its early morning route. I got out of bed. I wasn't going to lie here feeling sorry for myself. If they didn't want me at their table, I'd find my own. Thanksgiving Day arrived gray and cold. I woke up to the sound of my upstairs neighbor's family arriving. Footsteps overhead, children laughing, the muffled warmth of voices I couldn't make out. Someone's grandmother was asking about parking. Someone's kid was already crying about something. The smell of something delicious drifted through the vents. Stuffing, maybe, or the beginning of gravy. A real family, a real holiday. Right above my head, close enough to hear, but worlds away from my reality. I made instant coffee and sat by the window, watching the snow fall on the empty street below. My phone stayed silent all morning. No calls, no texts, not even a happy Thanksgiving from anyone in my family. Around noon, I made the mistake of opening Instagram. Allison had posted a photo. The whole family gathered around the dining table, Mom and Dad at opposite ends. Allison in the middle, glowing and pregnant, her husband Ryan's arm draped across her shoulders, their 2-year-old son in a tiny turkey sweater reaching for a roll. Everyone was smiling. The caption read, "So grateful for my family. These are the people who matter most." I zoomed in on the photo, counted the place settings. 4 adults, 1 toddler, 5 chairs. There wasn't even an empty chair where I should have been. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd erased me, like I'd never existed at all. I closed the app, stared at the ceiling. I thought about ordering delivery and spending the day in bed. That's what I deserved, right? A sad meal alone in my dark apartment, feeling sorry for myself. That's what the dramatic daughter gets. But something in me refused. No, I wasn't going to sit here and let them win. I wasn't going to let their rejection turn me into exactly what they accused me of being, a sad, bitter, dramatic mess curled up in her own misery. I grabbed my coat. If I was going to eat Thanksgiving dinner alone, I was going to do it somewhere with actual food, with light, with life, with candles on the table and the smell of real turkey and the sound of other people being happy. Even if I wasn't one of them, I just had to find a restaurant that was still open. Harborview Grill was one of those old Boston institutions, dark wood, brass fixtures, white tablecloths that had probably been starched by someone's grandmother. The kind of place that still had cloth napkins and candles on every table and waiters who called you ma'am without a hint of irony. More importantly, it was one of the few restaurants in the city that stayed open on Thanksgiving. When I pushed through the heavy door, the warmth hit me like a wave. The smell of roasted turkey and fresh bread and something sweet, pie maybe, or that caramelized smell of brown sugar melting into butter. Soft jazz played from invisible speakers, and everywhere, families, couples with grandparents, parents with children, groups of friends who laughed like they'd known each other since childhood. The restaurant hummed with the sound of people who belonged somewhere. The hostess looked at me with barely concealed pity. Her eyes swept over my coat, my solo presence, my face that probably still carried traces of this morning's tears. Just one tonight? Just one. Yes, just me. She led me to a tiny two-top in the corner, squeezed between the kitchen door and a large family that had pushed 3 tables together. I could have touched their chairs if I reached out. Your server will be right with you. I sat down, opened my menu, tried to look like this was a choice, like I was an independent woman choosing to dine alone on Thanksgiving, rather than a reject who had nowhere else to go. The family next to me was celebrating hard, an older couple at the head of the table, probably in their late 60s, the man with silver hair and kind eyes, the woman with a sort of elegant poise that suggested she'd been beautiful her whole life and would be beautiful forever, a middle-aged man with his wife and 2 kids, and a younger man, around 30, who kept making everyone laugh with stories that involved elaborate hand gestures. 3 generations. Easy affection. The kind of family that passes dishes without asking, that interrupts each other not to compete, but because they can't wait to add to each other's joy. I watched them out of the corner of my eye and felt something crack open in my chest. This is what family is supposed to look like. The Thanksgiving special? My server appeared with a bread basket and a tight smile. Yes, please. I was going to get through this dinner. I was going to eat my turkey and drink my wine and pretend I was fine. And then I was going to go home and cry in private like a person with dignity. I was not going to break down in public. I was not. My food arrived. Golden turkey skin, cranberry sauce pooled like a jewel, a perfect scoop of mashed potatoes, a fan of green beans, a roll that steamed when I broke it open. It looked like a magazine photo, like the kind of meal you see in advertisements for families that don't exist. I couldn't taste any of it. I sat there pushing food around my plate, trying not to look at the family beside me, trying not to think about my own family gathered around their table in Connecticut, laughing and passing the gravy and not giving a single thought to the daughter they'd discarded. And somewhere between the turkey and the untouched pie, something shifted. I understood suddenly what I'd been avoiding for 27 years. This wasn't about Thanksgiving. This wasn't about Allison's pregnancy or my mother's need for peace. This was about a pattern so deep it had shaped my entire life. I had spent 27 years trying to earn a place at their table, bending myself into smaller and smaller shapes, swallowing my hurt, apologizing for having feelings, staying quiet when I should have spoken, speaking up only to be told I was too much. And what had it gotten me? A corner table, a meal alone, an Instagram photo with no empty chair. If I kept going like this, if I kept trying to be small enough, quiet enough, agreeable enough, what would I have left? At some point, there'd be nothing left to shrink. The tears came before I could stop them. I turned my face toward the window, hoping no one would notice. Grabbed my napkin and pressed it to my eyes, trying to be invisible, trying to disappear the way I always did when feelings became inconvenient. Then a voice cut through the fog. Honey? Warm, concerned, close. Are you okay? I looked up. The older woman from the family next to me was standing beside my table. Silver hair swept back from her face. Kind eyes, the kind of eyes that looked like they'd spent a lifetime actually listening to people. A face that somehow managed to be both elegant and approachable, the sort of face you'd trust with a secret. She was looking at me like I mattered. I'm fine, I said automatically. The words came out hoarse and unconvincing. Just allergies. The woman raised one eyebrow, not judging, just knowing. Allergies don't usually make people cry into their napkin on Thanksgiving. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That obvious? Only to someone who's paying attention. She smiled, and something about that smile made me feel less alone than I'd felt in months. I'm Eleanor. Megan. Well, Megan. She glanced back at her family, then at me. The younger man, her son, I assumed, was watching us with curiosity but no judgment. "No one should eat alone on this day. Why don't you come join us?" I shook my head immediately, the reflex of a lifetime of not wanting to impose. "Oh, no, I couldn't. I don't want to intrude." "You're not intruding." Her voice was gentle but certain. "I'm inviting. There's a difference." "I really appreciate it, but my husband tells terrible jokes," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "And my son Ethan keeps trying to start debates about things no one wants to argue about on a holiday. You might as well come suffer with us." The older man, her husband, waved at me from the table. His smile was warm and undemanding. "She won't take no for an answer," he called over. "Trust me, 45 years and I've never won an argument." The younger son, Ethan, apparently, grinned. "He's not wrong." I looked at my cold turkey, my empty table, my napkin still damp with tears. Then I looked at Eleanor and her warm eyes and her family that somehow had room for a stranger. Something in me cracked. Not broke, cracked open, like a door I'd been keeping locked for years finally giving way. "Okay," I heard myself say. "If you're sure I'm not—" "I'm sure." Eleanor put her hand on my shoulder. "Come on, we just opened another bottle of wine and there's way too much pie." I stood up on shaky legs and followed her to their table. They made room for me like I'd always been there. Someone pulled up a chair. Someone else handed me a plate. Before I could even sit down, I had a glass of wine in my hand and a warm roll on my plate. "I'm Robert," the older man said, shaking my hand firmly. "This is my wife Eleanor, our son Daniel and his wife Christine, their kids Lily and Noah, and our youngest, Ethan." "Hi," I gave an awkward little wave to the table. "I'm Megan. Thank you so much for—" "What do you do, Megan?" Daniel asked, passing me the mashed potatoes like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm a graphic designer, freelance mostly." "That's wonderful," Christine said. She had a kind face, the sort of person who made you feel comfortable just by existing. "I can barely draw a stick figure." "Mom, stick figures are easy," the little girl, Lily, protested. "Even I can do that." Everyone laughed. Not at anyone, with each other. It was such a foreign sound. Ethan caught my eye from across the table. He was around my age, maybe a little older, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and an easy smile that reached his eyes. "Fair warning," he said. "My dad's about to tell a joke." "I am not," Robert protested. "He is," Eleanor said. Robert grinned, already unable to contain himself. "Okay, fine. What did the turkey say to the computer?" "Dad, no," Daniel groaned. "Google, Google, Google." The kids burst into giggles. Christine rolled her eyes. Ethan shook his head, but he was smiling. And I actually laughed. A real laugh. For the first time all day. Robert raised his wine glass. "A toast to unexpected guests who make our table complete." Everyone raised their glasses, including me. I looked around at these people, strangers all of them, until 15 minutes ago, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Warmth, acceptance, the first faint stirring of what it might feel like to belong. After dinner, while the kids ran off to explore the restaurant and the men argued good-naturedly about football, Eleanor moved to the chair next to mine. "How are you doing?" she asked quietly. "Really?" I looked down at my plate. "Better. This is really nice. Thank you." "You're welcome." She took a sip of her wine. "But that's not what I asked." Something about her directness made me want to be honest. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the exhaustion of pretending. Maybe it was just that she was the first person in a long time who seemed like she actually wanted to hear the answer. "My mom called me 3 days ago," I finally said. "Told me not to come home for Thanksgiving. My sister is pregnant and she didn't want drama." "Drama?" "That's what they call it when I ask questions they don't want to answer." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I see." "It's fine," I added quickly, reflexively. "I mean, it's not fine, but—" "It's not fine," Eleanor said. Her voice was gentle but firm. Can I tell you something I learned in 30 years as a family lawyer? I blinked. You're a lawyer? Retired, family law. She smiled. I've seen every kind of family dysfunction you can imagine, and I've learned that the people who accuse you of causing drama are usually the ones creating it. They just need someone to blame. The words hit me like a physical force. You're not the problem, Megan. Eleanor put her hand over mine. You never were. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. Those were the words I'd needed to hear my entire life. When the dinner finally ended, when the check was paid over my protests and coats were gathered and sleepy children were carried to cars, Eleanor pressed something into my hand. A small card, cream-colored, elegant. Eleanor Whitmore, J.D., Family Law, retired. Below that, a phone number and an address in Brookline. If you ever need to talk, she said, call me. I mean it. Thank you. Robert appeared beside us, shrugging on his coat. Sunday dinners, every week at our place. You're welcome any time. I shook my head. That's so kind, but I couldn't. You could, Ethan said, joining the group. And you should. Mom never says things she doesn't mean. Trust me. Eleanor squeezed my hand. Family isn't blood, Megan. It's showing up. I stood there in the restaurant lobby, holding a business card from a woman I'd met 3 hours ago, receiving an open invitation from a family I had no claim to. Outside, the snow was falling harder. Through the window, I could see other families hurrying to their cars. Children carried on shoulders, grandparents clutching to-go containers of leftover pie. I looked back at the Whitmores, Robert helping Eleanor with her scarf, Daniel carrying sleepy children, Ethan waiting by the door with an expectant look. Okay, I said. Maybe I'll stop by sometime. Eleanor smiled like she'd known I'd say yes all along. I walked home through the snow that night, the business card warm in my pocket. The streets were quiet. Most of Boston was home with their families, sleeping off their turkey. But I didn't feel alone anymore. For the first time in 27 years, I didn't feel alone. I had no idea that I'd just met my future family. I didn't go to Sunday dinner the next week, or the week after that. It felt too strange, too forward, too much like I was imposing on someone else's family. These people had been kind to me once, on a holiday when kindness was easy. That didn't mean they actually wanted me showing up at their house, expecting to be fed and welcomed like I belonged there. I belonged nowhere. 27 years had taught me that much. But Eleanor called. Just checking in, she said, her voice warm through the phone. How are you doing? I'm fine, I said automatically. Megan. I could hear her smile. We've established that fine isn't an answer. Try again. Dick, I laughed despite myself. I'm okay. Working a lot, staying busy. Busy is good, but busy isn't the same as happy. A pause. We missed you at dinner on Sunday. You didn't even know me a week ago. I know you now. Her voice was matter-of-fact, like this was the most obvious thing in the world. Robert made his famous pot roast. It wasn't the same without someone new to impress. I'm sure it was delicious. It was. You should come taste it yourself this Sunday. I hesitated. The reflex to decline was so strong it almost came out before I could stop it. But something else was stronger, a small, desperate part of me that wanted to believe this invitation was real. I don't want to impose. You keep using that word. Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. Imposing is showing up uninvited. I'm inviting you. There's a difference. You said that before. Because it's still true. I stared at my ceiling, my empty apartment. The silence that had become so familiar, it felt like a roommate. Okay, I heard myself say. Maybe I'll come by. Wonderful. Sunday at 5. I'll text you the address. She hung up before I could change my mind. That first Sunday, I stood on the Whitmore's porch for 5 full minutes before I worked up the courage to knock. The house was exactly what I'd imagined, a beautiful Victorian in Brookline, the kind with a wraparound porch and tall windows, and the sort of lived-in elegance that suggested decades of happy memories. Christmas lights twinkled along the roofline even though it was only early December. A wreath hung on the door, real pine that smelled like everything good about winter. Through the window, I could see them moving around inside. Eleanor setting the table, Robert gesturing animatedly about something while Daniel shook his head. The kids, Lily and Noah, chasing each other through the living room. A real family, a real home. I didn't belong here. I was about to turn around and leave when the door swung open. There you are. Eleanor stood in the doorway, an apron tied around her waist, looking completely unsurprised to find me frozen on her porch. I saw you through the window. Were you going to stand out there all night? I was just... Come in. She pulled me into a hug like it was the most natural thing in the world. We saved you a seat. That was the first of many Sundays. Over the next 6 months, I became a regular at the Whitmore dinner table. Not every week at first. I was too afraid of overstaying my welcome for that. But often enough that the kids started expecting me. Often enough that Robert began setting out an extra place setting before I even arrived. Often enough that the drive to Brookline started to feel less like a journey and more like a homecoming. Robert taught me to play chess. I was terrible at it. I'd never had the patience for strategy, but he never seemed to mind. He'd sit across from me in his study, moving pieces with the slow deliberation of a man who had all the time in the world, explaining each move like I was the only student who mattered. The key, he said one evening, capturing my queen for the 3rd time that hour, is to think 3 moves ahead. Not just what you want to do, but what your opponent wants you to do. Is that how you won all those arguments with Eleanor? He laughed, a big, warm sound that filled the room. Who told you I won arguments? I said I never won. The secret to a happy marriage is knowing when to surrender gracefully. Eleanor showed me her secret pie crust recipe, the one she swore she'd never written down, passed from her mother to her, and now, impossibly, to me. We'd stand in her kitchen on Sunday afternoons, flour on our aprons, her hands guiding mine through the delicate process of cutting butter into flour. The trick is cold butter, she said, and cold hands, and patience, always patience, ways. I'm not very patient. You're more patient than you think. She smiled at me, and something in her eyes looked almost sad. You've been patient your whole life, Megan. Patient with people who didn't deserve it. Daniel's kids started calling me Aunt Megan without anyone telling them to. The first time Lily said it, reaching up for me to tie her shoe, casual as anything, I had to excuse myself to the bathroom so no one would see me cry. And Ethan. Ethan and I became friends, real friends, the kind who texted random thoughts at 2 a.m. and argued about movies neither of us had actually seen and sat next to each other at dinner without anyone having to arrange it. He was a photographer, freelance, like me. Struggling, like me. We understood each other's lives in a way that felt rare and precious. The worst part, he said one night, the two of us lingering at the table after everyone else had gone to bed, is when clients ask for something creative and then reject everything that isn't exactly what they already had in mind. Oh God, yes. I topped off both our wine glasses. Or when they say, I'll know it when I see it, and what they mean is, I have no idea what I want, but I'll blame you when I don't get it. We should start a support group. We should start a revenge society. He laughed, and I laughed, and somewhere in the space between us, something shifted. Nothing dramatic, nothing I could name, just a warmth that hadn't been there before. I didn't hear from my biological family once during those months. Not a call, not a text, not even a Christmas card. For the first time in my life, I stopped noticing. Because for the first time, I wasn't performing for love. I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into someone else's expectations. I wasn't holding my breath, waiting to be told I was too much or too little or too something. I was just existing, being Megan. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough. It felt like finally coming home. One spring afternoon, about 8 months after that first Thanksgiving, I arrived at the Whitmore house early. Eleanor had asked me to help with prep for Daniel's birthday dinner, and I'd taken the afternoon off work to be there. The door was unlocked. It always was on Sundays, so I let myself in. Eleanor, I called out. I'm here. No answer. I wandered through the house, past the living room with its overstuffed couches and family photos covering every wall, past Robert's study where the chessboard sat waiting for our next game, toward the back of the house where Eleanor's office was. The door was open. Eleanor sat at her desk, her back to me, holding something in her hands. She didn't seem to hear me approach. "Eleanor?" She startled, turning quickly. For a moment, just a moment, I saw tears on her cheeks before she wiped them away. "Megan." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're early. Is everything okay?" "Fine, fine." She set down what she'd been holding, a photograph in a silver frame. "Just taking a trip down memory lane. Dangerous thing to do when you get to be my age." I hesitated in the doorway. "I can come back if you need a minute." No, come in." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about something." I sat down, a knot forming in my stomach. This was it, I thought. This was when she'd tell me I'd overstayed my welcome, that it had been nice having me around, but maybe I should start finding my own way, that I'd misread their kindness as something more than it was. Instead, Eleanor picked up the photograph and turned it toward me. A girl smiled out from behind the glass. Young, maybe 23 or 24, with Eleanor's elegant features and Robert's kind eyes. She stood on a beach somewhere, hair whipping in the wind, laughing at whoever was taking the picture. "This is Rebecca," Eleanor said quietly. "Our daughter. Our youngest." I looked at the photo, then back at Eleanor. "I didn't know you had a daughter." "She died." Eleanor's voice was steady, but I could hear the effort it took to keep it that way. 15 years ago. Car accident. She was 24, the same age I'd been when we met." "Eleanor, I'm so sorry." She nodded, accepting the condolence the way people do when they've heard it 1,000 times. "Thank you. It's something you learn to carry. You never get over it, not really, but you learn to carry it." I didn't know what to say. I sat there looking at the photo of a girl I'd never met, feeling the weight of a grief I couldn't imagine. "Can I tell you something?" Eleanor set the photo down carefully, facing it toward her like she couldn't bear to turn Rebecca away. "The night I met you, Thanksgiving, I almost didn't go to the restaurant." "What do you mean?" "Rebecca died on Thanksgiving." Her voice was barely above a whisper. 15 years ago, this past November. That's why we eat at Harborview instead of at home. Too many memories here. Too many empty chairs. The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought of Eleanor walking over to my table, offering me kindness on what must have been the hardest day of her year. "I almost stayed home," she continued. "I was tired, sad. Robert tried to convince me to go, but I didn't have it in me. And then I thought about Rebecca, about how she would have hated the idea of me sitting alone in a dark house, feeling sorry for myself." Eleanor looked up at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "So I went. And I saw you." "Me? You were sitting at that little table, trying so hard not to cry. And I thought—" She paused, gathering herself. "I thought about what Rebecca would do if she saw a girl sitting alone on Thanksgiving, looking like the world had ended. And I knew she'd march right over there and demand that girl join our family." I felt my own eyes burning. "So that's what I did." Eleanor smiled, though it was watery at the edges. "I did what Rebecca would have done." "Eleanor." I didn't know how to finish the sentence. "I need you to understand something." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "I didn't invite you because you remind me of her. You don't, actually. Rebecca was loud and impulsive and terrible at sitting still. You're thoughtful and careful, and you notice things most people miss." She reached across the desk and took my hand. "I invited you because you needed someone to see you, and I was someone who knew what it felt like to be invisible." She squeezed my fingers. "I kept inviting you back because of who you are, Megan, not because of who I lost." I couldn't speak. The tears I'd been holding back spilled over, running down my cheeks unchecked. "I wanted you to know," Eleanor said softly, "because I didn't want you to find out some other way and think, I don't know, that you were a replacement, a stand-in for grief. I would never think that." "Good." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Because you're not. You're Megan, and that's more than enough." I wish I could say everyone in the Whitmore family welcomed me with open arms. But families, even good ones, are complicated. Daniel had always been polite to me, friendly even. He passed me dishes at dinner, asked about my work, laughed at my jokes. But there was something held back in him, a distance I couldn't quite bridge no matter how many Sundays I spent at his parents' table. I tried not to take it personally. Some people were just reserved. Not everyone opened up quickly. Then came the night I heard the truth. It was a Sunday in late spring. I'd arrived early again, becoming a habit now, and was heading toward the kitchen when I heard raised voices from the living room. Daniel and Eleanor. I froze in the hallway, knowing I shouldn't listen, unable to walk away. "Don't think you see what you're doing." Daniel's voice was strained, frustrated. "You're bringing this stranger into our family like she's always been here. She's not a stranger. Not anymore. She's been here what, 6 months? That's not family, Mom. That's a guest who doesn't know when to leave." The words hit me like a slap. I pressed my back against the wall, heart pounding. "Daniel!" Eleanor's voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "That's unfair, and you know it." "Is it?" A pause. "Mom, I'm not blind. I see what's happening. You lost Rebecca, and now you're trying to fill that hole with someone else. Some random girl you found crying in a restaurant. That's not—" "It is. It's exactly what you're doing." Daniel's voice cracked. "And I can't. I can't watch you replace her. I can't watch you give Rebecca's place at this table to someone who didn't even know her." Silence. I should have left. I should have slipped out the front door and pretended I'd never heard any of it. But my feet wouldn't move. "Daniel." Eleanor's voice was soft now, sad. "Is that really what you think I'm doing? I don't know what else to call it. Megan isn't a replacement for Rebecca. No one could ever replace Rebecca." "Then why?" Daniel's voice broke. "Why her? Why now? Why does she get to sit in Rebecca's chair and eat at Rebecca's table and—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. I understood suddenly what I'd been missing. Daniel wasn't just reserved. He was grieving. Still, after 15 years. And every time he looked at me, he saw the space his sister should have occupied. I'd been filling a chair that wasn't empty to everyone. I slipped back out the front door as quietly as I'd come in. Sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at nothing, trying to decide what to do. Then I drove home. I didn't go back to Sunday dinner the next week, or the week after that. Eleanor called. I let it go to voicemail. Ethan texted, "Everything okay? Mom said you're not coming Sunday." I replied, "Just busy with work. I'll come by soon." I didn't. Because Daniel was right, wasn't he? I was an outsider. A stranger who'd wandered into someone else's grief and made myself comfortable. I'd been so desperate for a family that I'd ignored all the signs that I didn't really belong. The chair I'd been sitting in wasn't empty. It was full of 15 years of memories and loss and love that had nothing to do with me. 2 weeks after I stopped coming to dinner, Eleanor showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find her standing in my hallway, looking as elegant and composed as ever, despite the fact that she'd apparently driven 40 minutes across the city without warning. "You weren't answering your phone," she said. "I've been busy." "No, you haven't." She raised an eyebrow. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. There wasn't really another option. Eleanor walked into my tiny studio, taking in the unmade bed, the stack of dishes in the sink, the general air of someone who'd stopped caring about their surroundings. She didn't comment on any of it. "I know what you heard," she said. I stiffened. "What?" "Daniel told me. He saw your car outside that day. He figured out you must have—" She sighed. "I'm sorry, Megan. You shouldn't have found out that way." "Found out what? That I'm not welcome?" "That's not— that I've been sitting in a dead girl's chair for 6 months while her brother watched and hated every second of it." The words came out sharper than I intended. Eleanor didn't flinch. "Daniel doesn't hate you." "Could have fooled me." "He hates that his sister is dead." Eleanor sat down on the edge of my bed, the only place to sit in my cramped apartment. "He hates that 15 years have passed and it still hurts like it happened yesterday. He hates that his parents have found a way to keep living while he's still stuck in the moment he lost her." I stayed standing, arms crossed, protecting myself from whatever came next. Rebecca was his twin, Eleanor continued quietly. Did you know that? I shook my head. They did everything together. Sports, school, even went to the same college. When she died, Eleanor's voice caught. It was like watching half of him die with her. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Because we don't talk about it. Not really. We've all learned to carry our grief quietly, like civilized people. The bitterness in her voice was surprising. Maybe that was a mistake. She looked up at me, and I saw the same woman who'd walked over to my table on Thanksgiving. The same kindness, the same knowing eyes. Daniel isn't angry at you, Megan. He's angry at a world that took his sister. You just happen to be a convenient target. That doesn't make it hurt less. No, it doesn't. She patted the bed beside her. Sit down, please. I sat. I'm going to tell you what I told Daniel after you left that day. Eleanor took my hand. You aren't Rebecca's replacement. You couldn't be, even if I wanted you to be, because Rebecca was Rebecca and you are you. Then why? Let me finish. Her grip tightened. When I saw you in that restaurant, yes, I thought of Rebecca. I thought of how she would have never let a crying stranger eat alone. I thought of doing what she would have done in her honor. She paused, gathering herself. But that was one moment, one decision. Everything after that, every Sunday dinner, every conversation, every time I called to check on you, that wasn't about Rebecca. That was about you. How do I know that's true? You don't. Eleanor's voice was matter-of-fact. You can't know what's in someone else's heart. You can only decide whether to trust them. I looked at this woman who'd pulled me out of my loneliest moment, who'd fed me and welcomed me and treated me like I mattered when my own mother couldn't be bothered. I don't know how to trust people, I admitted. My whole life, the people who were supposed to love me just didn't, or couldn't, or chose not to. I know. How do I know you won't do the same thing? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You don't. That's what trust is, choosing to believe in someone even though you can't be certain, even though you might get hurt. That sounds terrifying. It is, she smiled. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is spending your whole life alone because you're too afraid to let anyone in. I thought about my apartment, my empty refrigerator, the phone that only rang when Eleanor called. I don't want to cause problems in your family, I said. If Daniel doesn't want me there. Daniel and I had a long talk after you left. A real talk, for the first time in years. Eleanor squeezed my hand. He's not okay. He hasn't been okay for a long time, but he's finally agreed to see someone, a therapist, someone who can help him work through what he's been carrying alone. Because of me? Because of a lot of things, but you were the catalyst. She stood up, straightening her coat. Now, Sunday dinner is at 5. Are you coming or not? I went back to Sunday dinner. Daniel was there, as he always was. When I walked in, he looked up from the book he was reading, and our eyes met. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he nodded. Just a small nod, an acknowledgement. Not warm, not welcoming, but not hostile either. It was a start. The weeks that followed were different. Daniel didn't suddenly become my best friend. He wasn't Ethan, cracking jokes and filling silences with easy warmth. But he stopped avoiding my eyes. He started passing me dishes directly instead of leaving them on the table for me to reach. Small things, tiny shifts in the landscape of our interactions. One evening, about a month after my conversation with Eleanor, Daniel found me on the back porch. I'd stepped out for air. The house was loud with birthday celebrations for Noah, and sometimes I still needed to escape the noise of family happiness. Mind if I join you? I looked up, surprised. Sure. He sat down on the porch swing beside me, leaving a careful foot of space between us. For a while, we just watched the sunset paint the garden in shades of orange and pink. I owe you an apology. I turned to look at him. You don't have to. I do. He kept his eyes on the horizon. What I said about you, that you were a guest who didn't know when to leave. That was cruel. And it wasn't true. It's okay. I understand why you— Please let me finish. His voice was quiet but firm. I've been seeing a therapist, Dr. Patterson. Mom probably told you. She mentioned it. It's helping, I think. He finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in his face before: vulnerability. I've been angry for 15 years, angry at the drunk driver who killed Rebecca, angry at God for letting it happen, angry at my parents for moving on when I couldn't. That makes sense. And then you showed up. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. This random woman who fit so easily into our family, who laughed at Dad's terrible jokes and learned Mom's pie recipe and made the kids adore her. And I thought— He trailed off. I waited. I thought if they could love you, that meant they didn't need Rebecca anymore. That she could be replaced, that her memory could just be overwritten. I would never try to replace her. I know that now. He looked at me fully, something shifting in his eyes. Dr. Patterson said something that stuck with me. She said the heart isn't a finite resource. Loving someone new doesn't mean loving someone old any less. There's room for both. That's a nice thought. It's a hard one. He let out a breath. I'm working on it. We sat in silence for a while longer. The sun slipped below the trees, and the porch lights flickered on automatically. I don't expect us to be best friends, I said finally. I know I'll never be Rebecca. I don't want to be, but I hope we can be something, eventually. Daniel nodded slowly. I'd like that. He stood up, paused, then did something unexpected. He held out his hand. I took it. We shook, formal and awkward, and somehow exactly right. Welcome to the family, Megan. The words came out stiff, like he was still learning how to say them. For real this time. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't a declaration of brotherhood. But it was a door opening, and that was enough. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Ethan and I sat on the same porch where Daniel and I had talked. The air was warm, summer finally arriving after a long, cold spring. I saw you talking to Daniel earlier, Ethan said. It looked intense. It was good, actually. I think we finally understand each other. Mom said you almost stopped coming. He turned to look at me. Why didn't you tell me what happened? I shrugged. I didn't want to cause problems. You're not a problem, Megan. His voice was soft but serious. You're the best thing that's happened to this family in a long time. I felt my cheeks warm. That's a lot of pressure. I'm serious. He shifted closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his shoulder against mine. Before you, we were all just going through the motions. Sunday dinners were obligations, not celebrations. We showed up because that's what we did, not because we wanted to. And now? Now I actually look forward to Sundays. He smiled, that easy Ethan smile I'd come to know so well. I look forward to seeing you. Something in the air shifted, a tension I hadn't noticed building, suddenly impossible to ignore. Ethan, I know. He held up a hand. I know. It's complicated. You're part of the family now, and I don't want to make things weird. It's already weird. Is it? I looked at him, really looked at him. The way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the laugh lines around his eyes, the kindness that seemed to radiate from him like warmth from a fire. I don't know what this is, I admitted. Between us, neither do I. He reached over and took my hand, gentle, careful, giving me every chance to pull away. But I'd like to find out, if you would. I thought about all the reasons to say no, the complications, the potential for disaster, the fear that this, like everything else in my life, would fall apart and leave me more alone than before. Then I thought about what Eleanor had said, about trust, about choosing to believe in someone even though you might get hurt. Okay, I said. Let's find out. Ethan smiled, squeezed my hand, and somewhere in my chest, a door that had been locked for 27 years finally, fully, swung open. Time has a way of softening edges. 2 years after that first Thanksgiving, my life had become something I wouldn't have recognized from the vantage point of my lonely studio apartment. The girl who'd sat crying into her napkin at Harbor View Grill. She felt like a stranger now, a ghost of someone I used to be. I'd moved out of the studio, not far, still in Boston, still close enough to walk to my favorite coffee shop, but into a real apartment. 1 bedroom, a kitchen with actual counter space, a living room where I could host people if I ever wanted to host people, which I now sometimes did. The design agency had hired me full-time after 2 years of freelance work. Art director, a title that still felt too big for me, like wearing someone else's coat. But I was growing into it, learning to take up space, learning that my ideas had value, that my voice deserved to be heard. And every Sunday, without fail, I drove to Brookline. The Whitmore house had become my anchor, the place I thought of when someone said the word home. I knew which floorboards creaked, which cabinet held the good wine glasses, which corner of the couch was Robert's and therefore permanently off limits. I knew that Eleanor hummed while she cooked, and that the back door stuck in humid weather, and that the garden was Robert's pride and joy, even though he pretended it was just something to keep busy. I knew these people, and more importantly, they knew me. Daniel and I had found our rhythm. We weren't close the way I was close with Ethan. We probably never would be, but we'd built something solid, a mutual respect, an understanding. He'd been in therapy for 2 years now, working through grief he'd been carrying since he was 27. Sometimes, after dinner, he'd catch my eye across the table and nod. A small acknowledgement. I see you. You belong here. It meant more than he probably knew. Christine had become something like a sister to me. She was the one I called when work was overwhelming, when I needed advice about nothing in particular, when I just wanted to hear another woman's voice. She'd fold me into her chaos. 2 kids, a demanding job as a social worker, a husband still learning to process his emotions, and somehow make me feel like I was helping just by being there. Lily and Noah had stopped treating me like a novelty and started treating me like furniture, in the best way. I was just Aunt Megan now, the person who helped with homework and snuck them extra dessert and always took their side in arguments about bedtime. And Ethan and I had been together for a year and a half. Not officially at first. We'd spent months circling each other, neither willing to name what was happening between us. But eventually the Sunday dinners turned into Tuesday coffee dates, turned into Thursday movie nights, turned into waking up in each other's apartments more often than not. You know, Robert said one Sunday, watching Ethan and me clear the table together, "When Eleanor first brought you home, I didn't expect you to become my daughter-in-law." Dad. Ethan's ears turned red. We haven't. I'm just saying. Robert winked at me. If you're going to keep him, someone should warn you about his snoring. I don't snore. You absolutely snore, I said. It's like sleeping next to a freight train. Traitor. I laughed and he laughed and Robert wandered off looking pleased with himself. And I thought, this is what it feels like. This is what family feels like. Not perfect, not without complications, but real. Mine. My biological family had become a distant memory. 2 years of silence. No calls on my birthday. No cards at Christmas. No awkward attempts at reconciliation. Just nothing. As if I'd never existed at all. Sometimes I wondered if they thought about me, if my mother ever looked at Allison's children and thought about her other daughter, if my father ever reached for the phone and then put it down, if Allison ever mentioned me to anyone, or if I'd been erased from the family narrative entirely. I didn't know. I'd stopped trying to know. There was grief in that, a dull ache that never quite went away, but there was also peace. I'd spent 27 years waiting for them to love me. Now, I was learning to live without that love, to fill the space with something better. One afternoon, about 2 years after that first Thanksgiving, I was sitting with Eleanor on her back porch. The garden was in full bloom, roses climbing the trellis, tomatoes ripening on the vine, everything lush and alive and reaching toward the sun. Robert was inside watching some game, his occasional shouts filtering through the open window. Ethan had gone to pick up more wine. It was just the 2 of us enjoying the warmth of a summer afternoon. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said. "Of course. Have you ever thought about making this official?" I frowned. Making what official? This. She gestured vaguely at the house, the garden, the life we'd built. Your place in our family. I'm not sure what you mean. Eleanor set down her tea and turned to face me fully. Her expression was serious but warm, the look she got when she was about to say something important. Adult adoption, she said. It's a legal process where a consenting adult is formally adopted by another family. It creates a legal parent-child relationship, new birth certificate, new legal next of kin, everything. I stared at her. That's a real thing? Very real. I helped many people through the process when I was practicing. She smiled. The law recognizes what the heart already knows, Megan. That family can be created, not just inherited. You want to adopt me? Robert and I have discussed it. We would be honored. She paused. But only if you want it. This isn't something we're pushing on you. It's just an option. Something to think about. I couldn't speak. The idea was too big, too overwhelming to process all at once. I know it's a lot, Eleanor said gently. You don't have to decide anything now. I just wanted you to know it was possible, whenever you're ready. What about Daniel? The question came out before I could stop it. Would he be okay with it? Daniel supports this completely. We asked him before we ever brought it up to you. Eleanor's eyes softened. He's not the same person he was 2 years ago, Megan. None of us are. And he sees what you mean to this family, what you mean to all of us. I looked out at the garden, at the life Robert had cultivated with decades of patience and care. I thought about the dining room table where I had a permanent seat, the bedroom upstairs that everyone called Megan's room, even though I'd never officially claimed it. I thought about my mother's voice on the phone, "Don't come home this year." And then I thought about Eleanor's voice, that first Thanksgiving, no one should eat alone on this day. I need time, I said, to think about it. Of course. Eleanor squeezed my hand. Take all the time you need. The decision to move forward with the adoption brought paperwork, mountains of it, forms to fill out, documents to gather, legal hoops to jump through. Eleanor guided me through every step, patient and thorough. But there were things I needed to handle myself, like getting my financial records in order. I was sorting through old bank statements one evening, 3 years of transactions I'd never bothered to organize, when I noticed something strange. A deposit, small, regular, recurring, every month for the past 2 years. $200, like clockwork, from an account I didn't recognize. I frowned, pulling out more statements. The deposits went back to December 2 years ago, the month after that first Thanksgiving, the month after my mother had told me not to come home. Someone had been sending me money for 2 years, and I had no idea who. The next morning, I called my Aunt Grace. Grace Holloway was my father's younger sister, the black sheep of the family, according to my mother. She'd moved to California 20 years ago and rarely came back for holidays. Growing up, I'd seen her maybe a dozen times, but she'd always been kind to me. Kinder than anyone else in my family, at least. She was also the only person from my old life I hadn't completely cut off. We exchanged Christmas cards, the occasional text. Nothing deep, but enough to maintain a thread of connection. Megan! Her voice was warm when she answered. This is a surprise. How are you, sweetheart? I'm good, Aunt Grace. Really good, actually. I have a question. About Dad. A pause. What kind of question? Have you talked to him lately? We talk sometimes. He calls me when your mother isn't around. Another pause, heavier this time. He asks about you, Megan. Every time. My chest tightened. He does? Every single time. How you're doing. If you're happy. If you've found someone. Her voice softened. He doesn't know how to reach out to you directly. He thinks you hate him. I don't hate him. I know you don't, but he doesn't know that. I took a breath. Aunt Grace, I found something in my bank statements. Someone's been depositing money into my account every month. $200 for 2 years. Do you know anything about that? Silence. A long, telling silence. Grace? She sighed. Your father made me promise not to tell you. The words hit me like a wave. It's from him? He started sending it right after that Thanksgiving. He has a separate account your mother doesn't know about. He said, her voice caught. He said it was the only way he could take care of you without causing more problems at home. I sat down heavily on my bed. 2 years. 2 years of silence from my parents, and my father had been quietly sending money the entire time. He calls it the money I should have given you, Grace continued, for birthdays he missed, graduations he wasn't there for, all the times he should have stood up for you and didn't. Why didn't he just call me? Because he's a coward. Grace said it without malice, just sad acceptance. He always has been. He loves you, Megan. I truly believe that. He just doesn't know how to show it when showing it means standing up to your mother. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Sadness? Some twisted form of gratitude? Does he know about the adoption? I asked. What adoption? I'm being adopted. By another family. The Whitmores. Saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. They're going to be my legal parents. Silence. Then, oh, Megan. They love me, Aunt Grace. They actually love me. Not the way Mom and Dad love me in theory, from a distance when it's convenient. They love me every day. They show up for me. They choose me. I'm happy for you. And she sounded like she meant it. You deserve that. You always did. I know. What do you want me to tell your father if he asks? I thought about it. About the money sitting in my account. About the silence that had lasted 2 years. About all the words that had never been said and might never be said now. Tell him I got his messages, I said finally. Tell him I understand. And tell him it's too late, but I don't hate him for it. I just can't wait anymore. I'll tell him. Thank you, Aunt Grace, for everything. Take care of yourself, sweetheart. And let me know how the adoption goes. I want to celebrate with you. I promised I would. Then I hung up and sat alone in my apartment, holding 2 years of bank statements in my hands. My father loved me. In his own broken, cowardly way, he'd been trying to take care of me all along. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. 6 months later, I stood outside the Suffolk County Probate and Family Court, trying to remember how to breathe. The adoption paperwork had been filed. The home studies had been completed. Every legal requirement had been met, every form signed, every fee paid. All that remained was the hearing, a formality, Eleanor assured me. Just a judge signing off on what we all already knew, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Ready? Ethan appeared beside me, handsome in his dark suit, his hand finding mine. No. Good. Me neither. He squeezed my fingers. Let's do it anyway. The Whitmores had come in force. Robert and Eleanor, of course, Daniel and Christine. Even Lily and Noah, dressed up and fidgeting with the impatience of children who didn't understand why this required so much sitting still. We filed into the courtroom, a small room that smelled like old wood and bureaucratic determination. The judge was a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She shuffled through the paperwork as we took our seats. This appears to be in order, she said, looking up with a small smile. We'll proceed with... The door opened. Everyone turned. I turned, and my heart stopped. Patricia Holloway stood in the doorway. My mother. She looked older than I remembered, grayer, more tired, the lines around her mouth deeper than they'd been 2 years ago. But her eyes were the same, sharp, determined, fixed on me with an intensity that made my stomach clench. I object to this proceeding, she announced, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. The judge frowned. Excuse me? And you are? Patricia Holloway. I'm her mother. She pointed at me. Her real mother. And I'm here to stop this farce. The room erupted. Robert was on his feet. Eleanor had her hand on my arm. Daniel moved instinctively in front of Christine and the kids. And I couldn't move, couldn't speak, could only stare at the woman who'd told me not to come home and then shown up here, in this moment, to claim ownership of a daughter she'd discarded. Order. The judge's voice was calm but firm. Everyone sit down. Ma'am, you need to identify yourself properly and explain your interest in this proceeding. My mother walked to the front of the room, her heels clicking against the floor. She was dressed formally, expensively, the way she always dressed when she wanted to impress someone. Armor disguised as elegance. My name is Patricia Holloway. Megan is my biological daughter. She turned to face the judge fully. I was not informed of this hearing. I had no opportunity to contest the adoption, and I am telling you now, as her mother, as the woman who gave birth to her and raised her, that I do not consent to this. Mrs. Holloway, the judge's voice was patient. Adult adoption doesn't require parental consent. Your daughter is 30 years old. She has the legal right to make this decision for herself. But surely there must be some consideration for the natural family. There is no legal basis for your objection. The judge cut her off, not unkindly. However, given that you've traveled here, I'll allow you to make a statement. After that, we'll proceed. My mother's jaw tightened. She wasn't used to being overruled. Fine. She turned to face the room. The judge, the Whitmores, me. I want it on record that my daughter has been manipulated by these people. They found her at a vulnerable moment and exploited her pain. They've turned her against her real family. That's not true. The words came out before I knew I was going to speak. Everyone turned to look at me. You don't have to respond, Eleanor murmured. Yes, I do. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly, but I stood. Mom. The word felt strange in my mouth now, foreign. You're right that the Whitmores found me at a vulnerable moment. Do you know why I was vulnerable? She didn't answer. Because you called me 3 days before Thanksgiving and told me not to come home. Because you said my existence was drama that Allison didn't need. Because you made it clear that after 27 years, I still wasn't worth a seat at your table. That's not fair. I'm not finished. The room went silent. Even the judge was watching now, her pen still against her notepad. You're right that I was alone that night. You're right that I was crying. You're right that a stranger walked over to me in a restaurant and changed my life. I took a breath. But the Whitmores didn't manipulate me. They didn't exploit me. They did something much simpler than that. What? They invited me to dinner. My mother's face shifted. Confusion, anger, something that might have been shame. They asked how I was doing. They remembered my birthday. They called just to check in. They did all the things that parents are supposed to do. All the things you never did. And when I tried to push them away, when I assumed I wasn't really welcome, they kept showing up anyway. I looked at Eleanor, at Robert, at Daniel, who gave me a small nod of encouragement. That's not manipulation, Mom. That's love. And I'm sorry if you don't recognize it. Megan. My mother's voice cracked. I am your mother. I carried you for 9 months. I raised you. You can't just replace me. I'm not replacing you. I said it quietly now, without anger. Just truth. You weren't there to replace. You were never really my mother, not in the ways that mattered. You were just the woman who gave birth to me and then spent 27 years making sure I knew I'd never be as important as Allison. That's not... Why do you even care? The question surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise her. 2 years. 2 years of silence. You didn't call. You didn't write. You didn't even send a birthday card. And now you show up here acting like you have some claim on me? Why? My mother opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time I could remember, she seemed at a loss for words. Is it because you actually miss me? Or is it because you can't stand the idea of someone else having what you threw away? The silence stretched. My mother's eyes were wet now, tears she was fighting not to shed. I don't know, she finally whispered. I don't know. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. Then figure it out. My voice was gentle now, sad, but don't do it here. Don't do it in a courtroom, trying to stop me from being happy. Do it on your own time. And maybe someday, when you've figured it out, we can talk. I turned to the judge. I'd like to proceed, Your Honor. The judge nodded slowly. Any further objections, Mrs. Holloway? My mother looked at me, at the Whitmores, at the family I'd built without her. No, she said, her voice barely audible. No further objections. She turned and walked out of the courtroom. She didn't look back. The judge signed the papers. It took less than 5 minutes after my mother left. A signature here, a stamp there, and suddenly, legally, officially, permanently, I was Megan Whitmore. Eleanor cried. Robert cried. Even Daniel wiped his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Lily tugged on my sleeve. Does this mean you're really our aunt now? I was always really your aunt, I said, scooping her up. Now it's just official. So we have to invite you to Thanksgiving forever? Forever and ever. Good. She wrapped her arms around my neck. I like it when you come to Thanksgiving. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright spring afternoon, the Whitmores surrounding me like a protective wall. Robert had his arm around Eleanor. Daniel was carrying Noah on his shoulders. Ethan held my hand like he'd never let go. How do you feel? Eleanor asked. I thought about it. About my mother's face when she'd walked away. About the money my father had been sending for 2 years. About all the complicated feelings I'd have to sort through eventually. But right now, standing in the sunshine with my family, my legal family, I felt something simpler. Free, I said. I feel free. Eleanor smiled and pulled me into a hug. Behind us, the courthouse doors closed. In front of us, the rest of our lives waited. And for the first time in 30 years, I was exactly where I belonged. 1 year after the adoption, life had settled into something beautiful. Ethan and I had moved in together, a brownstone apartment in Cambridge with exposed brick walls and windows that let in the afternoon light. It was bigger than either of us needed, but we filled it with plants and books and photographs from Ethan's travels. With mismatched furniture from estate sales and art prints we'd argued over for hours. With the accumulated evidence of 2 lives becoming one, I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. The design agency had promoted me twice. I had a team now, 3 junior designers who looked at me like I knew what I was doing, which meant I had to actually figure out what I was doing. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But the best parts of my life weren't about work. They were Sunday dinners that now felt as natural as breathing. They were lazy Saturday mornings with Ethan, coffee cups balanced on our chests while we debated whether to actually get out of bed. They were phone calls with Eleanor that lasted an hour and covered everything from recipe modifications to childhood trauma. They were chess games with Robert that I still always lost, but now I lost with dignity. They were Lily calling me at random hours to tell me about her day, and Noah sending me drawings he'd made at school, and Daniel texting me articles he thought I'd find interesting. Small gestures that said you're one of us without ever having to use the words. I had a family, a real one, and every day I woke up grateful for it. The proposal came on a Thursday evening. We'd gone back to Harborview Grill, Ethan's idea. He'd made reservations weeks in advance, which should have been my first clue that something was happening. Ethan didn't make reservations. Ethan showed up at restaurants and charmed his way to a table with that smile of his. This feels circular, I said as we slid into a booth. Not my old booth, the tiny one in the corner. A better one by the window, with a view of the harbor lights dancing on the water. That's the point. He was fidgeting with his napkin. Ethan never fidgeted. I wanted to bring you back to where it all started. Technically, it started at your parents' table. I was just crying over cold turkey when your mom found me. Okay, where the beginning of the beginning started. He took a breath. Can you just go with it? I had a whole speech planned. I raised an eyebrow. A speech? Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like you already know what I'm going to say. I don't know what you're going to say. I did, though. Or I hoped I did. My heart was already racing. Ethan reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was sweating, which was oddly endearing. This man who made everyone laugh, who never seemed nervous about anything, was sweating because of me. 4 years ago, he said, my mom walked over to a stranger's table and changed all of our lives. I remember watching her do it and thinking she was crazy. Who invites a random crying woman to Thanksgiving dinner? Eleanor Whitmore, apparently. Eleanor Whitmore, definitely. He smiled, but his eyes were serious. And then you showed up at our table, all red-eyed and apologetic, trying to take up as little space as possible. And I don't know what I thought. Something like, who is this person, and why is she so sad, and I want to know her story. That's a lot of thoughts for a first meeting. I'm a complex person. He squeezed my hand. But here's what I didn't think. Not that first night. I didn't think I was meeting the love of my life. That came later. That came slowly, Sunday by Sunday, conversation by conversation, until one day I realized I couldn't imagine my life without you in it. My eyes were burning. I blinked hard, determined not to cry before he got to the actual question. Megan, I've watched you heal over these 4 years. I've watched you go from someone who didn't believe she deserved to be loved to someone who knows, really knows, that she does. And I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I know your family hurt you. I know you're still scared, somewhere deep down, that the people who are supposed to love you will let you down. But I'm not going anywhere. I never have been, and I never will be. He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the candlelight and scattered it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. Megan Whitmore, he said, his voice steady even though his hands were shaking. Will you marry me? I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only look at this man who'd been my friend first, my confidant second, my rock through 2 years of healing and another 2 years of building something new. Yes, I whispered. Then, louder, yes, yes. He slid the ring onto my finger. The restaurant erupted into applause. I'd been so focused on Ethan I hadn't noticed the other diners watching. And then I saw them, tucked into a corner booth with champagne already poured. Robert and Eleanor, grinning like they'd known all along. You planned this, I said, half laughing, half crying. Mom couldn't resist. Ethan pulled me into a kiss. She wanted to be here for the moment her son finally locked down the best thing that ever happened to him. Her words or yours? Both. Eleanor appeared beside our table, tears streaming down her face, and pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. My daughter, she whispered. My beautiful daughter. And I realized, holding her, that I wasn't just gaining a husband. I was gaining the family I'd always dreamed of, officially, permanently, forever. The wedding planning began immediately. Venue options, catering tastings, flower consultations, color schemes and seating charts, and the endless, exhausting question of who to invite. Eleanor threw herself into it with the enthusiasm of a woman who'd been waiting years for this moment. Christine offered practical advice. Even Daniel chipped in with opinions about wine selections. But one question kept me up at night. The wedding invitations would need a line for parents of the bride, and I knew exactly what I wanted it to say. Robert and Eleanor Whitmore, the family who chose me, the family I chose back. But there was another family, one I hadn't spoken to in over 3 years, one that had lost any legal claim to me but still shared my blood, my history, my first 27 years of memories. What did I owe them? The invitations were printed on cream cardstock, elegant and simple. At the top, in flowing script, together with their families, Megan Whitmore and Ethan Whitmore request the pleasure of your company at their wedding celebration. And below that, the line I'd agonized over. Parents of the bride, Robert and Eleanor Whitmore. The family who chose her and whom she chose in return. No mention of the Holloways. No acknowledgement of the people who'd raised me for 27 years and then told me not to come home. It felt right. It felt necessary. It felt like closing a door I'd been holding open for too long. The invitations went out. 200 of them, to friends and family and colleagues and everyone who mattered in our new life. None went to Connecticut. None went to Patricia or David or Allison Holloway, but somehow they found out anyway. 3 weeks before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Did you really think we wouldn't hear about this? I stared at the screen. The area code was Connecticut. The tone was unmistakable. Mom. Before I could respond, another text came through. Your cousin, Jennifer, told Aunt Ruth, who told your father, who told me. You're getting married, and you didn't even have the decency to tell your own mother. I should have ignored it, should have deleted the messages and blocked the number and moved on with my life. But something made me type back. You stopped being my mother the day you told me not to come home. You made that choice. I just made it official. The response came immediately. I am still your mother. Nothing changes that. Not some piece of paper. Not these people who've brainwashed you. I gave birth to you. I raised you. You can't just erase me. I took a breath, typed carefully. You erased me first. Instagram photo, Thanksgiving 3 years ago, 5 chairs, no empty seat. Remember? Silence. For 5 minutes, nothing. Then, I want to talk to you, in person, before this wedding. Please. I almost said no. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to say no. But then I thought about Eleanor, about what she'd said years ago, about trust, about choosing to believe in people even though you might get hurt. I wasn't going to reconcile with my mother. I knew that. Some wounds were too deep to heal. But maybe I could give her a chance to say whatever she needed to say. Maybe I owed that to the girl I used to be, the one who spent 27 years hoping her mother would see her. Fine. One conversation. You can come to my apartment. I sent her the address, and then I called Ethan and told him what I'd done. Do you want me there? He asked. No. This is something I need to do alone. Are you sure? No, I admitted. But I'm going to do it anyway. She came on a Tuesday afternoon. I heard her footsteps in the hallway, heels clicking against hardwood, the same sound that had echoed through my childhood home whenever she was about to deliver bad news. The knock on my door was sharp, impatient, familiar. I opened it. Patricia Holloway stood in my doorway. She looked older than she had at the courthouse, older than I'd ever seen her. The gray in her hair had spread. The lines around her eyes had deepened. She was still dressed impeccably, designer blouse, pressed slacks, pearls at her throat. But there was something fragile about her now, something I'd never noticed before. Megan. Her voice was careful, controlled. Mom. We stood there for a moment, neither of us moving. Finally, I stepped aside. Come in. She walked into my apartment slowly, taking it in. The exposed brick, the photographs on the walls, Ethan and me in Central Park, the whole Whitmore family at Christmas, Lily and Noah making silly faces at the camera, a life she had no part in, documented everywhere she looked. It's nice, she said. Your apartment. It's nice. Thank you. I didn't know what to expect. She turned to face me. I thought maybe you'd be living in some commune situation with these people who've adopted you. They're called the Whitmores, and they have their own house. I have mine. Right, of course. She clutched her purse in front of her like a shield. Can we sit? I gestured to the couch. She sat on the edge, perching rather than settling. I took the armchair across from her. Silence stretched between us. 3 years of silence, compressed into a single room. Why are you here? I finally asked. And don't say it's because you want to come to the wedding. We both know that's not going to happen. I don't know why I'm here. The honesty seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised me. I've been asking myself that question since I sent you that text. I think I just needed to see you, to know you're real. I'm real? You're different. She looked at me, really looked at me, and something flickered in her eyes. You look happy. I am happy. Good. The word came out strangled. That's good. More silence. I waited. Whatever she'd come to say, she needed to say it herself. I've been seeing a therapist, she said finally, since the courthouse, since I watched you choose another family and realized I couldn't stop you. That's good, Mom. Therapy is good. Don't patronize me. I'm not. I mean it. I'm glad you're getting help. She looked at her hands, at the wedding ring she still wore, the one that matched Dad's. She's been asking me questions, the therapist, about my childhood, about how I was raised, about why She swallowed. About why I treated you and Allison differently. I said nothing, just waited. I didn't realize I was doing it. For years, I didn't realize. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I thought I was being a good mother. I thought I was protecting Allison, taking care of her, making sure she never felt unsafe. I didn't see what I was doing to you. What were you doing to me? She looked up. Her eyes were wet. Ignoring you. Dismissing you, making you invisible. A tear slipped down her cheek. The therapist says it was trauma. When Allison was born and she almost died, 30 seconds where I thought I'd lost her, something in me broke. I became obsessed with keeping her safe, with never letting anything bad happen to her. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that I had another daughter who needed me too. I know about the birth trauma, I said quietly. I overheard you telling Grandma when I was 12. She stared at me. You knew? I knew. It didn't make it hurt less. No. She wiped her eyes. I don't suppose it would. I thought about all the things I could say, all the anger I could unleash, but sitting here, looking at this woman who suddenly seemed so small and broken, I couldn't find the rage I'd carried for so long. I just felt sad. Why didn't you come after me? I asked. After that Thanksgiving, after you told me not to come home, why didn't you call? I was ashamed. The words came out like a confession. I knew, somewhere deep down, that what I'd done was wrong, but admitting it would mean admitting that I'd been wrong for years, for decades. It was easier to tell myself you were overreacting, that you'd come around eventually, that if I just waited long enough, you'd forgive me without me having to apologize. That's not how forgiveness works. I know that now. She took a shaky breath. And then the adoption happened, and I realized you weren't coming back. You'd found a new family, a better family, and I'd lost you forever. You didn't lose me. You let me go. She flinched, but she didn't argue. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said. I'm not asking for an invitation to your wedding or a place in your life. I know I haven't earned that. I know I may never earn it. Then what are you asking for? She looked at me. Her daughter, the one she'd overlooked for 27 years, and for the first time I saw something I'd never seen in her face before. Recognition. I just wanted to tell you that I see you, she said. Finally. Too late. But I see you. Her voice broke. And I'm sorry, Megan. I'm so sorry for all the years I didn't. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to list every birthday, every graduation, every moment she'd chosen Allison over me, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused. But another part of me, the part that had spent 4 years healing, 4 years learning what real love looked like, that part just felt tired. Thank you, I said finally, for saying that, for seeing me. Does it help? I don't know yet. I was being honest. Maybe. Someday. She nodded, accepting it, not pushing for more. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. Dad's been sending me money. For years. Did you know? Her face went pale. What? $200 a month. Since that first Thanksgiving, Aunt Grace told me it was his way of taking care of me without causing problems at home. She was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, no, I didn't know. Would you have stopped him if you did? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. He loves you, she said finally. In his way. He's always loved you. His way wasn't enough. No. She stood up, smoothing her slacks. It wasn't. For what it's worth, I've been harder on him than anyone. I know I made it impossible for him to stand up for you. I know I'm the reason he stayed silent. She met my eyes. I'm trying to be better. To him, to Allison, to myself. It's slow work. That's all any of us can do. She walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. Your sister wanted to come, she said. Today. She wanted to see you. Why didn't she? She thought you'd say no. She thought you'd hate her. I don't hate Allison. I know, I told her that. But she's carrying her own guilt. She knows how things were. She's just starting to understand her part in it. I thought about Allison, about all the years I'd resented her, envied her, wished I could be her just so I could finally be seen. Tell her she can reach out, I said, if she wants to. I'm not promising anything, but I'll listen. My mother's eyes widened. It was more than she'd expected. Thank you, Megan. She opened the door. For seeing me today. For listening. Goodbye, Mom. She hesitated. For a moment, I thought she might try to hug me, but she seemed to sense that would be too much, too soon. Goodbye, she said. And, congratulations, on your wedding. I hope it's everything you deserve. Then she was gone. I stood in my empty apartment, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. The click of her heels growing softer, softer, until they disappeared entirely. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the need to. Instead, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But peace. The morning of my wedding dawned golden and perfect. June in Napa Valley. A vineyard we'd fallen in love with the moment we saw it. Rolling hills covered in grapevines. A stone barn converted into an event space. Mountains in the distance turning purple as the sun rose. I woke up in the bridal suite with Eleanor beside me. She'd insisted on staying the night before, just in case you need anything, which really meant because I can't bear to be away from my daughter on the most important day of her life. Good morning, sweetheart. She was already awake, already dressed, already holding a cup of coffee that she pressed into my hands. How do you feel? Terrified. Good. That means it matters. Christine arrived an hour later with Lily in tow. Lily had been designated junior bridesmaid, a title she took very seriously, supervising the arrangement of my dress, my shoes, my jewelry with the intensity of a tiny general. The flowers are here, she announced, dragging Christine by the hand. And they're so pretty, Aunt Megan. You're going to cry. I'm already crying. Good crying or bad crying? Good crying. I pulled her into a hug. The best crying. The hours blurred together after that. Hair and makeup, the dress, ivory silk, simple and elegant, nothing like the elaborate gowns I'd dreamed of as a girl. This dress was better. This dress was me. Eleanor adjusted my veil, her fingers gentle against my hair. You look beautiful, she said softly. Absolutely beautiful. I looked at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was calmer, stronger than the girl who'd sat alone in a restaurant 5 years ago. That girl hadn't believed she deserved to be loved. This woman knew better. On the vanity beside me sat a copy of the wedding program. I picked it up, reading the line I'd never thought I'd be able to write. Parents of the bride, Robert and Eleanor Whitmore. The family who chose her. Are you nervous? Eleanor asked. About marrying Ethan? No. I set down the program. About what might happen? A little. I'd hired security for the wedding. A quiet precaution. After everything, the courthouse, Mom's visit, the uncertainty of what my biological family might do, I couldn't take chances. Eleanor put her hands on my shoulders. Whatever happens today, you have a family who chose you. We will always choose you. Never forget that. I hugged her tight. I love you, Mom. It still felt new, calling her that, but it also felt true. I love you too, sweetheart. She pulled back, holding my face in her hands. My daughter. My beautiful daughter. Through the window, I could see guests arriving. Ethan was already at the altar, looking nervous and handsome in his gray suit. Robert was with him, probably telling terrible jokes to calm his nerves. It was time. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed of. Robert walked me down the aisle, steady and proud. The guests rose as we passed, friends, colleagues, the Whitmore extended family, everyone who'd become part of my new life. Lily scattered flower petals with excessive enthusiasm. Noah carried the rings on a pillow, his face scrunched in concentration, and at the end of the aisle, Ethan waited. He was crying before I reached him. I was crying too. Robert handed me off with a kiss on the cheek and a whispered, "Take care of her." And then it was just us, Ethan and me, standing before everyone we loved, ready to promise forever. The officiant spoke, but I barely heard her. I was too busy looking at Ethan, at the man who'd been my friend when I needed a friend, my family when I needed a family, my home when I had none. The vows we'd written ourselves were simple. We'd agreed. No elaborate poetry, no lengthy declarations. Just the truth. "Megan," Ethan said, his voice steady despite his tears, "I vow to choose you. Every day, in every way. I vow to be your partner, your supporter, your biggest fan. I vow to make you laugh when you want to cry and hold you when you can't stop crying. I vow to love you not despite your past, but because of it, because everything you've been through made you the incredible woman standing in front of me. I vow to be your family from this day until my last day." "Ethan," I said, my own voice breaking, "I vow to trust you, to let you in, even when I'm scared. I vow to be your partner in everything, the big stuff and the small stuff and the stuff in between. I vow to laugh at your dad's jokes even when they're terrible." Laughter rippled through the guests. Robert called out, "They're not terrible," and everyone laughed harder. "I vow to build a life with you," I continued. "A real life. The kind I never thought I'd have. I vow to be your family from this day until my last day." The rings were exchanged. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife. And when Ethan kissed me, the cheering was so loud I could feel it in my bones. We walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, into our new life. The reception was in full swing. The stone barn glowed with candlelight. The band played jazz standards. Guests mingled and laughed and filled their plates from the buffet. Everything was perfect, exactly what I'd hoped for, exactly what I'd dreamed. And then the security guard found me. "Mrs. Whitmore." He appeared at my elbow, discreet and professional. "There are 3 people at the entrance. They claim to be your biological family." My heart stopped. I'd expected my mother, maybe my father, but 3 people? Ethan materialized beside me. "What's going on?" "My biological family is here." "See." His expression hardened. "I'll handle it." "No." I took his hand. "This is my moment. I'll handle it." I considered my options. I could have them removed. I could pretend they weren't there. I could avoid this confrontation entirely and enjoy my wedding night in peace. But something in me said no. Let them see. Let them see what they lost. Let them see the family who stepped up when they stepped away. Let them witness the life I built without them. "Let them in," I told the security guard, "but don't seat them with the family. Put them in the back." "Are you sure?" Ethan asked. "I'm sure." The guard nodded and disappeared. A few minutes later, I saw them. 3 figures standing uncertainly at the edge of the reception. Patricia in her formal dress, looking small and out of place. David beside her, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched, the posture of a man who knew he didn't belong. And a third person I hadn't expected. Allison. My sister was thinner than I remembered, her face drawn in ways that suggested sleepless nights. She held herself apart from our parents, arms wrapped around her middle, looking around at the celebration with an expression I couldn't read. The MC stepped up to the microphone. The music softened. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "if I could have your attention, please." The room quieted. Guests turned toward the front. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. "Before we continue the celebration, I'd like to introduce some very special people." I watched my biological family from across the room. Patricia was craning her neck, trying to see the head table. David stood behind her, looking like he wanted to disappear. Allison's eyes found mine across the crowd. "Please join me in welcoming the parents of the bride." Patricia straightened up. I could see her preparing to acknowledge the introduction, to accept the recognition she believed was rightfully hers. "Robert and Eleanor Whitmore." The room erupted in applause. Robert and Eleanor stood from the head table, beaming, waving to the guests. People cheered. Someone whistled. The photographer's flash went off again, and across the room, my mother's face went white. I watched it happen. The confusion, the disbelief. The moment she understood what those words meant, Robert and Eleanor Whitmore, the moment she realized she'd been replaced completely, officially, publicly, David looked stunned, speechless. But it was Allison who moved first. She walked toward me before anyone could stop her. Not Patricia, not David. Allison. Megan. She reached me just as the applause was dying down. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Can I talk to you? Just for a minute?" I hesitated. This wasn't part of my plan. I'd expected my mother to cause a scene, my father to stand there helplessly. I hadn't expected my sister. "Please," Allison said. "I came here to say something." "Not to ruin your day, just to say something." I looked at Ethan. He gave a small nod. "Your call." "1 minute," I said. "Outside." We walked out to the vineyard terrace, away from the noise and the lights. The evening air was warm, heavy with the scent of grapes ripening on the vine. The sun had just set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Allison said, "I'm sorry." I turned to look at her. "I know that doesn't mean anything," she continued, her voice cracking. "I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I had to say it. I had to come here and look you in the face and tell you that I'm sorry for everything." "Everything is a lot." "I know." She wiped her eyes. "All the birthdays Mom made about me, all the times you were forgotten, ignored, pushed aside, the baby shower I didn't invite you to, the Instagram post. God, the Instagram post." 5 chairs, I said quietly. I counted. "I know. Mom told me." Her voice broke. "I didn't even notice. That's the worst part. I was so used to you not being there that I didn't even notice when there wasn't a chair for you." I didn't say anything, just let her talk. "Ryan and I have been in therapy, marriage counseling, individual counseling, the works." She let out a shaky laugh. "Turns out when your whole family is dysfunctional, you need professional help to figure out what normal looks like." "That's good, that you're getting help." "It's excruciating, actually." She looked at me. "But it's also clarifying." The therapist asked me once to describe my childhood, and I realized I couldn't do it without mentioning you, without mentioning all the ways you were treated differently. And she asked me how that made me feel, and I said guilty. And she said, "Good. You should feel guilty." I blinked. "Your therapist said that?" "She's very direct." Allison almost smiled. "She said guilt is appropriate when you've done something wrong. The question is what you do with it." "What are you doing with it?" Allison was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm trying to be better, to my kids, to myself, to you, if you'll let me." "What does that look like?" "I don't know yet." She met my eyes. "I know I can't undo the past. I can't give you back all those years. But maybe I can be different going forward, if you want that, if you're willing to try." I thought about all the years of resentment, all the times I'd wished I was Allison, just so I could finally be seen, all the anger and hurt and loneliness. Then I thought about what Eleanor had said years ago. The people who accuse you of causing drama are usually the ones creating it. Allison wasn't accusing me of anything. She was owning her part. "I'm not ready to forgive you," I said honestly. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready." "I understand." "But thank you for coming, for saying this." I took a breath. "You can reach out after the wedding, if you want. I'm not promising anything, but I'll listen." Allison's eyes filled with tears. "That's more than I deserve." "Maybe." I looked at her, my sister, the golden child, the one who'd had everything I'd wanted. She looked tired, broken, human. "You have kids now," I said. "Liam and Oliver, right?" She nodded, surprised I remembered. "Don't do to them what Mom did to us. Don't pick one over the other. Don't make either of them feel invisible." "I won't." Her voice was fierce. "I swear to you, Megan, I won't." "Good." We stood there for a moment longer. Then Allison did something unexpected. She held out her hand. I looked at it. Then I took it. We shook, formal and strange. like two people meeting for the first time. In a way, we were. "Congratulations," Allison said. "On your wedding. Your husband seems wonderful." "He is. And your family, the Whitmores, they seem—" She searched for the word. "Kind. They seem kind." "They are." "Good." She released my hand. "You deserve kind people, Megan. You always did." Then she walked away, back toward the reception, back toward our parents who were standing exactly where I'd left them, uncertain, uninvited, watching from the outside. I found my mother and father where Allison had left them. Patricia looked shattered. Whatever composure she'd arrived with was gone. David was crying openly, tears running down his weathered face, making no effort to hide them. "Megan," Patricia's voice was hoarse. "We shouldn't have come. I'm sorry. We'll leave." "Wait." The word surprised me. They both froze. I looked at my father, really looked at him, the man who'd been sending money for years without ever having the courage to call, the man who loved me in silence because he was too weak to love me out loud. "I know about the money, Dad." He flinched. "How?" "Aunt Grace told me. 2 years ago." He couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry. I know it wasn't enough. I know—" "It wasn't enough," I agreed. "It will never be enough." I paused. "But it was something, and I want you to know that I saw it, that I understood what you were trying to say." He looked up at me then, his eyes red and swollen. "I love you, Megan. I've always loved you. I was just too much of a coward to—" "I know, Dad." My voice was gentler than I expected. "I know." Robert Whitmore appeared beside me. He didn't say anything, just put his hand on my shoulder, a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone, that I'd never be alone again. "It's time for you to go," Robert said to my biological parents. His voice wasn't unkind, but it was firm. "This is my daughter's wedding day. She deserves to enjoy it." Patricia opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Whatever fight she'd had left seemed to drain out of her. David reached out, hesitated, then dropped his hand. "Goodbye, Megan. And congratulations." "Goodbye, Dad." He turned and walked away. Patricia lingered a moment longer, her eyes searching my face for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or understanding, or just some sign that I was still her daughter under all the hurt. "Goodbye, Mom." She nodded once. Then she followed David out into the night. I watched them go, the parents who'd raised me, the family I'd spent 27 years trying to belong to. They walked across the parking lot, got into their car, drove away. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. "Are you okay?" Robert asked. I turned to look at him, this man who'd become my father in every way that mattered, who'd taught me chess and made me laugh and walked me down the aisle. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." The Whitmore house was chaos, the best kind of chaos. It was Thanksgiving, 5 years to the day since I'd sat alone at Harborview Grill, crying into my napkin. 5 years since Eleanor had walked over to a stranger's table and changed all of our lives. Now I sat at the head of that stranger's table, my table, with my daughter in my lap. Lily Eleanor Whitmore, 6 months old, named for the niece who'd first called me aunt and the mother who'd given me a second chance. She was perfect. Tiny fingers, rosebud mouth, Ethan's dark hair and my stubborn chin. She gurgled happily as Robert made faces at her from across the table, completely unbothered by the chaos surrounding her. And there was so much chaos. Daniel was arguing with Ethan about the proper way to carve a turkey. Christine was trying to keep Noah from eating all the rolls before dinner. Lily, big Lily, now 15 and impossibly grown up, was taking pictures of everything for her Instagram. Eleanor was directing traffic from the kitchen, orchestrating the meal with the precision of a general commanding troops. Robert caught my eye across the table and winked. "You know," he said, "when Eleanor first brought you home, I didn't expect you to become a permanent fixture." "You've told me that before." "I'll probably tell you again. It's a good story." He grinned. "Best decision my wife ever made, inviting that crying stranger to dinner. I wasn't crying that much." You were absolutely crying that much, Ethan said, dropping into the chair beside me. Mom said you went through 3 napkins. It was 2 napkins maximum. I have a very clear memory. Children, Eleanor called from the kitchen. Stop arguing about napkins and come help me with this gravy. Later, after the meal, after the pie, after the kids had fallen asleep in a pile on the living room floor, I stood on the back porch with Eleanor. The garden was dormant now, winter approaching, everything tucked in and waiting for spring. But even bare, it was beautiful. The bones of something lovely, resting until it was time to bloom again. How are you feeling? Eleanor asked. I looked back through the window at my family, my husband washing dishes, my daughter asleep in her grandfather's arms, my brother-in-law telling stories that made everyone laugh. My niece and nephew sprawled on the couch, exhausted from too much food and too much love. Happy, I said. Really, actually happy. Good. Eleanor squeezed my hand. You deserve it. I didn't used to think so. I know, but you do. You always did. She turned to face me. Can I tell you something? Always. That night, the first Thanksgiving, when I walked over to your table, I wasn't thinking about you. Not really. I was thinking about Rebecca, about what she would do if she saw a girl crying alone on her favorite holiday. I know, you told me. But here's what I didn't tell you. Eleanor's eyes were bright. Somewhere between that first dinner and now, it stopped being about Rebecca. It became about you. Only you. My daughter. The one I chose. I felt tears prick my eyes. Mom, I used to feel guilty about that. Like I was betraying Rebecca's memory by loving you so much. But my therapist, yes, I see a therapist too. We're all in therapy in this family. She helped me understand something. What? Love isn't finite. Eleanor smiled. The heart isn't a pie that gets smaller every time you cut a slice. It grows. It expands. There's always room for more. I thought about the family I'd been born into. The one that had taught me love was scarce, conditional, something you had to earn. Then I thought about the family I'd found. The one that had taught me love was abundant, unconditional, something you were given simply because you existed. Thank you, I said, for walking over to my table that night, for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for letting me. Eleanor pulled me into a hug. My daughter, my beautiful daughter. We stood there on the porch, holding each other, while inside the house our family laughed and loved and lived. That night, after everyone had gone home or gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room with a cup of tea and a sleeping baby. Lily, my miracle, stirred in my arms but didn't wake. Her face was peaceful, trusting. She had no idea how close she'd come to being born into a cycle of pain. How easily I could have repeated the patterns I'd been raised with. I will never make you earn my love, I whispered to her. I promise you'll never have to wonder if you're wanted. You'll always know. She yawned, her tiny fist uncurling, and fell deeper into sleep. I thought about my mother, about Allison, about the conversations we'd had over the past 5 years. Tentative, careful, nothing like the reconciliation movies promised. We weren't close. We might never be close. But we talked sometimes. We were trying. I thought about my father, who'd passed away 2 years ago. A heart attack, sudden and final. I'd gone to the funeral. I'd stood at his grave and cried for the father I'd never really had, and for the one I'd found in Robert Whitmore. I thought about all the empty chairs in my life, the ones at birthday parties that never happened, the ones at graduation ceremonies where no one sat, the one at that Thanksgiving dinner, the Instagram photo with 5 settings and no place for me. And then I thought about the chair I was sitting in now, in a house full of love, surrounded by family, holding my daughter, not an empty chair, a full one. Finally, impossibly, beautifully full. If you're reading this, if you've ever been the scapegoat of your family, if you've ever been told you're too much or too sensitive or always causing drama just because you dared to ask to be treated fairly, I want you to know something. It's not you. It never was. You deserve to be chosen, not as a backup, not as a last resort, not as the acceptable sacrifice when someone else's comfort is at stake. Chosen first, chosen fully, chosen without conditions. Family isn't blood. Family isn't obligation. Family isn't people who share your DNA but treat you like a burden. Family is the people who show up, the people who see you crying alone at a restaurant table and invite you to join them, the people who open their Sunday dinners and their hearts and their legal documents to make you officially, permanently, undeniably theirs. I spent 27 years trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it. And then I spent 5 years learning what love actually looks like. Not from the family I was born into, but from the family that chose me. If the people who are supposed to love you can't do that, if they've proven over and over again that you'll always come last, you have the right to build your own family. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to be happy. That's not revenge. That's not drama. That's just living your life without people who don't deserve a seat at your table. I found my people, and I hope, with all my heart, that you find yours too. You deserve it.